Come on in, pull up a chair and take a load off because today I'm going to review and page through the Blade Runner, the role playing game starter set from Free League Publishing. Should you be crashing through plate glass windows to get your hands on this starter set? Or does it turn out this is one Blade Runner which has lost its edge? Well, you're going to find out right after this. Howdy, 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 gang, and happy holidays. Welcome once again to the Duct Tape Studios. I'm Jeff McAleer, your host here at the Gaming Gang channel. As mentioned in the open, today I am going to review and page through the Blade Runner, the role playing game starter set from Free League Publishing. It's designed by Thomas Herenstam and Joe LaFavi, with artwork provided by Martin Grip, Gustav Ekelund, and Christian Granite. The box set is available as of today and carries an MSRP of $57.99, or you can grab just the PDF alone over at DriveThruRPG for $19.99. All that said, let's swing on over to the other camera because here I've got the starter set for Blade Runner, the role-playing game. Few things to mention before we dive on in. First off, the fine folks over at Free League Publishing were kind enough to provide me with this review copy, but neither I nor anyone else affiliated with the Gaming Gang has received any other sort of compensation for me to share this review with you. These days, it's important you know that. Also, I'll be picture in picture up here, as usual. So as we take a look at the two books, I'll end up cutting off a little bit of the upper left portion of them. I'm not going to look at each and every page, but I do want to give you a very good feel for what's in this starter set, as well as share my thoughts about it. Lastly, there is an adventure that is included in the starter set. So if you are a player hoping that your game master, or in this case, your game runner, is going to pick up the starter set, then once we get to the adventure, I would definitely recommend just tune out, because as much as I'm going to try to avoid spoilers, there are going to be some spoilers, and I am going to share looks at some of the clues that the player characters will receive as handouts. And you don't want the surprise of playing the adventure ruined by watching this review. Of course, I should also point out, if you are hoping that your game master is going to pick this up, you may want to tell them to watch this video so they can make an informed buying decision. Okay, let's dive on in. First of all, I've taken everything out of this box, but I did want to share the box with you. And I should point out, this is a really nice box. A lot of times with starter sets, the boxes are pretty flimsy. Not this one. This is really nicely put together. So first off, let's look at the rules. And this does utilize a modified Year Zero engine, which is mechanically what drives vast majority of the Free League Publishing role-playing games. But it is a little bit different than what you would find in, say, Mutant Year Zero, but very, very similar to what you would find in Twilight 2000. And I'll get into a little bit of detail as we talk about game mechanically. Should mention, you're not going to find a ton of background information about the world of Blade Runner in the year 2037, which is when this is set. So, of course, it's following the events of Blade Runner, which takes place in 2019, and about a dozen years before Blade Runner 2049. So there are callbacks to both films in both the rules as well as the adventure Electric Dreams, but you're not going to get a ton of background about the world. Now we get a timeline that'll explain some things, but you're not going to get, page after page of background material for you to utilize. Much of that is going to be contained in the core rule book. Also, there's no rules for creating characters, but you will receive 4 pre-generated characters to use in the adventure. We'll go into more detail with those when we move on into the adventure. I got to point out, I'm kind of curious where this setting is coming from. So I unfortunately did not see like the animes and things like that that were released building up to Blade Runner 2049. So I'm not overly familiar with those. And I also know that there are at least 2 current titles running from Titan Comics, which is across the pond, which focus on Blade Runner. I'm not sure if those are being utilized for background for this timeline or if Free League Publishing has been given some, no pun intended, free reign to work on the setting itself. So, kind of curious. And there is no bibliography or reference material, to point you to check out something else. So, a little disappointed with that. Mechanically, what you're looking to do is you're going to have dice that are going to correspond with both your attributes as well as your skills. So those letters run A through D. So A is the best. In fact, it's just the highest it could possibly be. And D is rather feeble. So what you're going to end up doing most of the time when you have a challenge, an action that you're looking to succeed at, and of course, like many role playing games, it is noted that the game runner should try to keep the dice rolling to a minimum only when it's something very important and something that is, crucial to the adventure. Don't need to be rolling dice to get out of your spinner, right? Or climb into your spinner and take off. So what you're going to see is you'll have A, which gives you a 12-sided die. We've got B, which gives you a 10-sided die. We have C, which gives you an 8-sided die. And we also have D, which gives you a 6-sided die. In order to succeed, you need to roll 6 or higher. And to make life easier, you'll actually find 6 or higher is marked with a little I. In fact, on the 2 higher dice, 10, 11, and 12, because we have that 12-sider, are marked with 2 little I's, which count as successes. Ones, as you see here, give you a little origami horse, or I should say unicorn. Take that back, because that's a reference to Blade Runner. And that is bad. So you want to stay away from ones. It just means when you fail a little bit worse. You can't push rolls as well. And if you have a 1 on your dice, that's going to cause harm, either physical damage or stress. So, as an example, let's say that I have a strength of C, which gives me that 8-sided die. Or I'm sorry. Yeah, it actually is the 8-sided die. And then I have a close combat of B, which will give me a 10-sided die. I get to roll both dice together, looking to get a 6 or higher. There is advantage, which could give you an additional lower die, or there's also disadvantage, which takes away your lower die. So you're stuck with just rolling a single die. I actually like the system for advantage and disadvantage. You can also push rolls. So let's say I'm battling it out with somebody in combat, and we'll get to combat in a moment, but just kind of give you an idea of the mechanics. So, oh, look at that. I'd get a 10. So that's 2 successes and a 3. If I really wanted, I could push my roll hoping to get another success, although I want to avoid a 1. Or I could just stick with the 2 successes, which the reality is I would probably just stick with the 2 successes. But let's say, as an example, I got this. Well, I wouldn't succeed, but I would have an opportunity. Usually, there are some things that you cannot push a roll on. I could re-roll one of the dice as far as trying to push it. Now, if I fail, I just fail. If I get a 1, then it's worse, and I can take either physical damage or stress. Now, one of the funny aspects too that I think is kind of cool is if you roll a 1, you cannot push that die. So if I wanted to push my roll, I would have to push this. And remember, I still have that 1, so if I fail, it is not good. And that essentially is the core mechanic to the game, rolling sixes. And of course, it's not as simple as that, but it is not very difficult to wrap your head around. That said, the authors do mention that this is a perfect role playing game for newcomers to the hobby. I would disagree. More so from the game runner side. And when we take a look at the adventure, I'll discuss that a little bit more. But I wouldn't say that this would be the first role playing game that I would introduce somebody to, just because there are some wrinkles and complexities involved that you would not find in other less crunchy role playing game mechanics and systems. Not to say that this is overly crunchy. In fact, if you are familiar with Twilight 2000, that is far crunchier with the mechanics, even though it still utilizes essentially the same core mechanic. So we have various different skills. There are only 13 skills. They are fairly broad as far as utilizing your skills. And then we also have some specialties, which could allow for some additional bonus to your die rolls. Combat has various different options, but it's still rather abstract. So, as far as like ranges, we have zones. So, effectively, if you're in the same zone as somebody, you can engage in close combat, hand to hand combat. Also, you have various different weapons that have different ranges as far as zones. For the most part, a zone is usually like the same room in a building or a short stretch of street. So we do have rounds, we have initiative, and I love the fact that we actually get a deck of initiative cards. This is something that we've also seen in Alien, the role playing game. So, as an example, if you could successfully ambush somebody, you're going to get the number 1 initiative card. So, you're going to go first in the combat round. Another aspect that I think is pretty cool in the close combat is it's an opposed roll. So, not only are you rolling your attribute in your skill, so is the NPC. So, if the defender ends up with more successes than you, they actually are the attacker and you are the defender, even though you initiated the combat. I found that to be pretty interesting. Range combat, just straight out roll. It's not an opposed roll at all. Another aspect of the game that is pretty interesting are the chase mechanics. And we have some various decks of cards that the game runner is going to use. We have ground chase obstacles, foot chase obstacles, and aerial chase obstacles. And your game runner is going to randomly just draw cards because this is almost like a mini game within the game. Both the pursuant and the prey are going to get to utilize chase maneuvers. So you might stop and fire your gun or whatever ranged weapon you happen to have. You may try to knock things over to block your pursuer's way. As the pursuer, you may try to cut the prey off. So pretty cool. I thought this was very interesting. So both the chasee and the chaser will receive a little deck of cards that they are going to select their maneuver from. All while the game runner is also tossing out different obstacles. So, as an example, this is a foot chase umbrellas. So, remembering Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049, you know, you've got those huge plastic umbrellas because it's always raining in Los Angeles, at least in this setting, right? So you're trying to fight your way through all these people with umbrellas. So I thought this was very cool. I thought this was very unique, a little bit different. So kudos for those chase mechanics. I should mention combat is very, very lethal in Blade Runner, the role playing game. There are critical hits, and those critical hits can be insta kills, and they are not necessarily on a particular spectrum. So you'll have different crit dice that you're going to roll. So the more powerful a weapon is, and we have piercing damage, we have crushing damage. So the more powerful a weapon is, the more damaging, the higher the die you're going to roll, up to a D12. But it's not just like, say, for an example, an 11 and 12 is an instant kill. No, like an 8 can be an instant kill and you're dead. That's it. There's no saving roll or anything like that. Now, if you lose enough hits where you're broken, that's the term utilized, then you can save against dying. But if you get an instant kill critical, that is it. So don't resort to violence as often as you would in other role playing games because you will find it is going to be very, very easy to find yourself with a total party kill. So, at its heart, Blade Runner, the role playing game, is a game of investigation, it is a game of solving cases. So, we get some rules utilizing that, how to approach running the game for the game runner. And then we have a tools of the trade section, which gives us some really cool looks at the gear that a Blade Runner will utilize. Another aspect I thought was interesting about the game mechanically is that you're not tracking individual bullets, you're not tracking all your chen yen, your money. You have, for an example, points for your finances that you can spend to try to improve your chances at doing things or to do something, period, like bribe somebody, pay somebody off. And we also have promotion points, which help advance you, and you can spend them in your investigations as well. And then we have humanity points, which you use to actually increase your skills. And I find it to be a very interesting mechanic with the promotion and the humanity points because there are plenty of times they're going to conflict. So, doing one thing is going to give you promotion points, doing something else gives you humanity points, but may end up costing you promotion points in the long run. So, I thought that was pretty cool as well. So we've got the various different decks of cards for chasing, the different maneuvers. We've got the initiative. We've got two of each die. So we've got 8 dice total. Very nice dice, in my opinion. That is only part of what is in this starter set. Let's talk about the adventure. And once again, there's going to be some spoilers here. I'm going to try to stay spoiler free, but you're going to find out there's going to be some spoilers. So we have 4 pre generated characters. And something else I like about Blade Runner, the role playing game, is that you can easily play this with a game runner and a single player. In fact, it's highly recommended you do not play with more than 4 player characters because you're all playing Blade Runners. And there are different archetypes as far as the Blade Runners as well. You get far more detail about that in the core rulebook. So we get our 4 pre-gens very nicely put together. We get a background. We get all of our stats. In case you're curious about the attributes, we've got strength, agility, intelligence, and empathy. And empathy is going to help you as far as those humanity points. And then we get a key memory, which is going to be important for your players. You can be a human or you can be a Nexus 9 replicant. And in this time in the timeline, Nexus 9s have recently been approved for use on Earth. Because, of course, if you're familiar with the extended timeline from 2049, you know that there's a period where all replicants are banned, not just the Nexus 6s, all replicants are banned from being on Earth. So that has been overturned. So we do have 2 player characters, which are human, and 2 player characters, which are replicants. So we've got that. We also have a case file time tracker, which the game runner is going to utilize because it's an investigation and it is also going to be a race against the clock. Player characters are also going to be able to take case notes. So we have that. Let's jump into the adventure, and then I'm going to share some of the handouts and some of the additional material that's included as well. I like the adventure. I especially love the handouts and the clues. And we have started to see a lot of additional material provided in some of these boxed adventures. So we have seen some of this with Alien the Role Playing Game, also from Free League Publishing. Very recently, we've seen the Dune Role Playing Game from Modiphius Entertainment utilize some of this as well. So with our NPCs, we have a deck of mug shots. I thought that's very, very cool. Just increasing the immersion of the players is what we're looking at here. I should also point out that the card stock on these cards is pretty nice. So that's a bonus as well. So, like I said, I'm going to try to stay away from major spoilers in the adventure, but essentially what happens is the player characters are brought in to investigate the death of a Blade Runner and the disappearance of another Blade Runner. And both of these Blade Runners are replicants. And you're going to deal with some moral dilemmas here, which is pretty much at the heart of Blade Runner. Not only the role playing game, but the films as well. And one thing that, and I'll probably talk a little more about this when I share my review of the core rule book. But one aspect of Blade Runner that I always thought was very important was the fact that we're talking about in this setting, all of these people, doesn't matter if you're human or replicant, are at best second class citizens. That's why they're still on Earth. That's why they live in rundown, dilapidated buildings. And it's kind of funny because some people are like third class citizens, like the replicants. Most women are treated as third class citizens as well in this setting. It's a very misogynistic setting. Now, of course, do you have to use that in your games? No, not at all. But I've always found that to be the case, at least in my interpretation of both of the Blade Runner films. I didn't see that so much in the role playing game, which is fine. And not everybody, gets the same thing from films. But I was a little surprised that we don't see a little bit more of the approach where, like, as an example, and it's a quote from the first movie, you're either cop or you're little people. And the thing is, vast majority of the people who are still remaining on Earth, human or replicant, are little people. So the adventure uh, is actually pretty cool. Although I have to point out, the finale of it skews way too close to the ending of the Blade Runner PC game that came out in the late 90s from Westwood. And I think it was Virgin published it. I played it. I recall it very, very well. In fact, I think they did a like enhanced edition that came out relatively recently. Very, very similar conclusions. So I don't think, well, I don't want to accuse anybody of like plagiarism or anything like that, but kind of get the feeling that it was cribbed a little bit. But all in all, pretty good adventure, pretty good investigation. And it's not something where the player characters are going to just be spinning their wheels because they didn't find a single clue. Oh, we didn't find out one clue, so we can't figure anything out. Something else I do like about the adventure too is it's not simply assumed that the player characters are going to succeed. So there are some options, some turning points where things can take a seriously bad turn for the worse. Should also point out that the player characters are members of law enforcement, so it's important that they keep that in mind when they're trying to learn information, interrogating suspects, and things like that. Because if they approach this like other role playing games where it's like, "Ah, I'm just going to intimidate everybody," they're going to find out they're going to get in trouble. They're going to get in trouble with their superiors. Also, in the adventure, there's some pretty cool callbacks to the original Blade Runner. Essentially, I found it kind of interesting who the player character's boss is. I thought that was pretty wild. So, all in all, like I said, good adventure, very solid adventure. Ending's a little too familiar to me. So, there we have that. So, something I really, really like a lot that's part of this is the clues, the handouts. I'm not going to look at all of them. I just want to give you a peek at some of this stuff. And I think this really, really helps with the immersion of the players into this game world. Now, one aspect I thought was very nice. And funny thing is, some of this stuff is it's not just all the same like card stock and things like that. I thought that was kind of interesting. So we get like a photograph. It's not an actual photograph, but it's kind of funny that photograph is different than material is different than a page that's ripped out of a book. So the thing that I find, we all even have like magazines, cover of magazines of newspapers. What I think is very interesting is we have crime scene photographs. So this is what the crime scene looks like. This is what the player characters are seeing, and they're going to look around for various different clues. They're going to say, "Oh, hey, what's that? What's that sitting on the table there? What's that over here?" Now, is everything in this image going to be relevant to the investigation? No. But I thought this was really, really a nice inclusion to this as well. And nicely enough, most of this is also reproduced in the adventure. So the game runner doesn't have to be digging through these handouts for their own reference. I thought that was really, really well done. Still have a few other items to show you. Now, of course, if you want to get a much closer look at a lot of this, I did an unboxing and first look on my live show, Gaming Gang Dispatch. So, by all means, if you want to get much closer looks at this, check that out. So, then we also have some maps that can be utilized as far as combat or just to give the player characters a better feel for where they're at, like so. The snake pit, which is the crime scene where the replicant is murdered. Different apartments, magazines, the Hollywood sign. There you go. There's a little spoiler for you. So we've got a bunch of these. And then we also have a map of Los Angeles with the various different sectors, which the player characters will actually use. They will utilize this to track down locations and that. So as you can see, this starter set is packed with goodies. It really, really is. So let's swing on over to the other camera. I'm going to share some final thoughts as well as my review score. There's a lot to really, really like about Free League Publishing's approach to Blade Runner. I'm very curious how they support this lineup. Now, according to both the core book as well as the starter set, there is a plan for an overall campaign. In fact, Electric Dreams is the first chapter of that campaign. So I'm very interested to see where that goes. But I also feel that it's probably not as easy to construct adventures in Blade Runner than it would for other role playing games. And it's something I'll get into on as far as my review of the core rule book, because that information's not included in the starter set. Tons of stuff to like. It's jam packed with goodies. I love the handouts as far as really bringing a feel of investigation to the game. I like the mechanics as far as investigation as well. I think the chase mechanics are pretty cool. Overall, the rules mechanically pretty easy to wrap your head around. As far as combat, there are enough options to give this a little bit of crunch as well. So it's not just real abstract. I like the fact that combat is extremely lethal. So resort to it as pretty much your last measure. I also like the fact that it's discussed in the rules saying, you know what? Don't be afraid as the game runner to kill player characters off. And yes, it can be traumatic for some players, but look at it in the long run as far as it advancing the storyline. So I like that as well. Few things I'm not so keen on. One is you don't really get too much background information about the year of 2037. That's kind of unfortunate there. We had actually more information about the LA Police Department than we do about the actual city of Los Angeles or, the setting itself. So, kind of, I also would have liked to have known where is this setting coming from? Is there other stuff that I can check out to get a better feel, to kind of immerse myself deeper into the background of the year 2037? That is not present as well. So I don't know if this is from like the Titan comics or if this is just something that Free League has been able to put together themselves with the approval of the estate of Philip K. Dick. I would have liked to have a little more information about that. Plus, as I mentioned, the conclusion to the adventure is just so close to being the same sort of conclusion as in the Blade Runner PC game. I don't know. One other aspect that I think I should point out, and this actually comes into play with the core rulebook as well, is I don't know how much variety you can really get playing only Blade Runners. Because once again, keep in mind, Blade Runners don't investigate all different kinds of crimes. They are looking to track down rogue replicants or replicants that are banned from being on planet. That is pretty much their job. So I'm really curious to see how this progresses. All right. All in all, though, I certainly do recommend picking up the Blade Runner, the role playing game starter set. I really do like it quite a lot, even though I've got some quibbles. So, on a scale of 0 to 10, I give the Blade Runner role playing game starter set an 8.5 out of 10. Do you have any interest whatsoever in running a Blade Runner role playing game? You really do owe it to yourself to pick it up. You really do. All right. That is it for this time out. Once again, if you like this video, by all means, please give it a quick thumbs up. Subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel if you haven't. And if you do subscribe, ding that bell. It'll not only let you know when I upload videos such as this review, I'll also tell you when my live stream, the Gaming Gang Dispatch, airs Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday evenings right here on YouTube at 7 p.m. Central. Of course, when you're not watching videos on the Gaming Gang channel, be sure to visit thegaminggang.com for all latest in tabletop gaming news, reviews, and a whole lot more you won't find on the YouTube channel. You know the drill. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. Everybody enjoy the holiday season. Thank you very much for taking time out to watch this video. And of course, here's hoping each and every one of you get to enjoy plenty of great gaming. Your gang.
Oh, hey, you're still here. That's okay. You don't have to leave just yet. In fact, why don't you subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel right here, or take a peek at the latest live stream, or even find out what YouTube recommends you check out from the channel. And of course, I'm Jeff McAleer. Thanks again for watching.